Today we're visiting Wookey Hole Caves. It's a cave that often has a bit of marketing positioning as a cave for children. Always appears a little bit childish. But that's totally not the case. It has attractions for children, but for all. So we're going to wander through the caves today. We're going to explore some of the history, and frankly a lot of it's myth. So we're going to see. You get to Wookey Hole, wander up the ravine above the old paper factory down a track, and you come into the cave, and the first chamber here is where the tour starts. You have a really fun tour guide who knows a lot about the caves and certainly knows how to be entertaining. And they bring you into this limestone cave and take you through the history and the stories behind Wookey Hole. Wookey Hole was actually dug out of the rock by the River Axe, which flows through here. And now it's at a much higher level than it used to be because the paper mill that was built required more water. So a canal was constructed, and that raised the water level within the cave. Earlier you could actually walk and crawl through to some of the later chambers, whereas now, as you'll see, the river's in the first major chamber. When we get here, you see the first view of the Wookey Witch. As we'll see, Wookey Hole caves are actually important for more than just the tales of the witch. Now, quite when this witch lived is quite hard to pin down, as there's not really any dates for her in the attraction itself, and even a search online, it's very difficult to get an actual date, even though there are some names of people involved. But the story goes that the Wookey Witch was a healing woman, maybe a midwife, maybe a healer, a person with the old ways. And she'd be blamed when something went wrong. And the people decided that they wanted her dealt with. And they wrote to the Bishop of Glastonbury, and the Bishop of Glastonbury sent a priest. And Father Barnard reached Wookey, which was actually called Oki back then, as Wookey is derived from Oki, which is Celtic for a cave, and seems to be related to the witch. So he found her and told her to leave. She refused in the first chamber, and she descended to this second chamber down the very dark and very tight slope into this large river-based cave, and you can see at the bottom there is the River Axe. And the river would have been slightly lower back then, but when she got there, the story goes that he splashed around some holy water, some of it hit her, and she turned to stalagmite. In fact, that dark shape you can see on the left of the screen, that's supposed to be the witch turned to stone. And behind us there's a small stalagmite, very small one, which was supposed to be her pet dog. Now, when the archaeologists excavated in the 1920s, they actually did find animal bones next to and in both of these. But today, obviously, it's a legend that people come to see, and it's used as a bit of a marketing tool by the Wookey Hole caves themselves. But really, it's good fun. And there's also a lot of history and significance to the caves themselves, because they're periodically flooded. In fact, if you lower the sluice gate on a canal, the river falls enough that it drains here and you can walk through to the next chamber. But here you can see this beautiful here. This is a column. It's over 100,000 years old. It's where stalactites and stalagmite have joined in the middle. And hopefully you get a feeling for the beautiful lighting here as we creep our way through to the next chamber. There's a beautiful chimney there which has been carved out of the rock by high water levels. And on the left here is a small pond inside a depression. And there's a stalagmite within that which is called St. Michael's Mount, which if you've ever been to St. Michael's Mount, it's quite an apt name for it. Yeah, beautiful rock formations. Very clean, clear water filtered through the rock. You see large deposits of calcium and iron as the rains run through the hillside. It's very much a limestone cave. And it has some very interesting formations, as we'll see later on. But certainly very good quality stalactites, stalagmites, columns. No poached eggs. Very hard in the both dark and very harshly lit caves to really get a feeling for how beautiful they are. But I'd say they look a lot better than they do on video. And you can see here a crack through the hillside with quite juicy deposits of calcium. You can see the formation process of the stalactites and stalagmites. If you watch the water, you can see the ripples of water drops falling into the water, but it's an incredibly slow process that these large caverns have been dug out. You see there the ripples. That's not from a breath of air. That's from little water droplets dropping from the ceiling. And that's what's dug out these pools and caves. What's deposited these rivulets of minerals on the walls. Here, this is, I believe, the third chamber. There's actually 25 main chambers that have been explored, but from the fourth chamber you have to swim through from the 4th to the 25th, although they've recently added a tunnel which allows us to walk through the hillside and reach chambers in the 20s, normally only accessible by cave divers. And we'll be getting back to cave diving, because this flattened dome of a room is actually where the first modern cave dive occurred. Because the water level had risen, you see it's almost like a beach here. But the river Axe runs through the centre of the room, and a large contraption was built to both pass communication back from the diver, who wore a deep sea diving helmet and very heavy clothing, and they were able to pump water through so they could signal more air, less air, pull back, release more slack. And this water at the bottom, they dove in there and they reached through to the 3rd and the 4th chambers. And they actually, when archaeologists have been there, found that in Roman days it was used as a place of burial because it was hidden away. Possibly it was seen as an entry to the underworld. Bodies were placed here ceremonially for a burial. Not in this chamber, but actually further down. Where this plaque is marks the original cave dive. And there's a very good, and you'll be pleased to hear, small display in the museum about cave diving and its history and how it evolved from, well, let's say, the significance of Wookey Hole Cave in the evolution of cave diving. You can understand why the Romans buried their dead here, a gateway to the underworld, but also a river, almost like the river Styx, but also a serenity. There's a peace and a cool and a very strong echo. Then we make our way up a channel, quite steep. It's not too slippy down here. It's pretty safe underfoot, and concrete floors have been added. The archaeologists actually prepared the cave. They dug it out about 7 foot of mud, and when they hit the bare rock, they put concrete in to provide a safe footing. And you can see now we're into some tunneled sections, and it does get very dark here. But I just want to show you the cheddar cheese. The caves provide almost an air-conditioned cool, perfect for the maturing of cheese. And as you'll know, cheddar cheese is very nearby. Well, here is Wookie's equivalent. You can see the moisture and condensation of the cheese room. Further in, beautiful cut through the rock. It's like a slice, jagged slice through the rock. Maybe 50 meters high. And we cross it through a small bridge. Again, over the ever-present River Axe. It's such a serene and sedate little stream that you really wouldn't think it could carve out these rocks. And as we'll see later, it definitely wasn't always so serene. There's an underground formation which I've seen above ground but never underground, because it can only be formed by a very strong river. Here you can see this is one of the channels you swim through to get deeper into the cave. I don't know if you've ever watched a video on cave diving, specifically cave diving disasters, but I can tell you it does not appeal to me. There are many things to go wrong and many ways to die in cave diving. None of them seem very pleasant. Even if I can understand why people enjoy exploring a new place, it's definitely not on my bucket list. I would say if you're claustrophobic or worried about the height or the footing, it really is fairly spacious in this cave. It's not too difficult. If you're over 5'5", you'll probably have to bend down a few times, but largely it's not too narrow. Think of being in a corridor. Most of it is pretty comfortable. I would say wear good shoes. Now when we get to this chamber, you can see the scale, the size of this very large chamber, and we're actually standing on a metal walkway bolted to the wall. You'll be glad to hear it's not swaying. But right in the middle, above the River Axe, you can see really. If you like caves, this is really cool. And if you don't know if you like caves but haven't been to one, I would definitely recommend it. It's probably longer than either of the Cheddar caves separately. And there are other caves, obviously. I'd say if you want really striking caves, those in Nerja in Spain are very beautiful. Or the Blue John Cavern's quite interesting up in Derbyshire. But this is definitely one of the better caves I've been to. Very striking and fascinating geologically. You can see very firmly suspended that walkway. And back in the 2010s, the decision was made to expand the cave system. Well, not really the cave system, but the access to it. So they dug and blasted this tunnel through, and it's a lot like if you've been down a coal mine. It's a lot like Workman's Passage in a coal mine. You walk about 100 meters, maybe a little bit more, and it cuts through a lot of openings and chambers in the river system and gets you through to a really spectacular cave that has only been accessible to us mere mortals who don't want to swim through a couple of miles of narrow caves underwater. But this chamber is gorgeous. It's a great addition, and you can see the immense forces of geology at play in the cave in a way that I don't think there's two things here I don't think I've seen anywhere else. But as we make our way in, it's all very well prepared for your everyday visitor. There's metal walkways, very strong and clear and not too slippy. You can see how the water's come in and it's carved. That quiet little river has carved this huge chamber. Stands about 60, 70 foot high, and sort of at a 45-degree angle with maybe 30 meters wide. But here's the clue as to how it happened. You see these almost rivulets frozen in stone. They're actually a geological formation that occurs when there's very strong, rapid flow of water. Effectively, a high pressure, large volume flow of water has run down that wall and carved those rivulets. It almost looks like the hill system. When you see a hill system from very high up, I remember flying across America, and as you pass the Continental Divide, if you look out of the plane, you can see in the desert where millennia ago rivers have carved these rivulets. And this is just on a smaller scale. It's actually a sign of the melting glaciers. So the river system would have flowed through here, but when the glaciers melted and the ice age finished and the water was released, huge volumes of water flowed through the rock, more than it could cope with, and it filled this, and just the strength and the volume of water carved like a chisel through the Carboniferous limestone, which is fairly soft. If you run your fingernail along it, you will bring some dust off the stone. But just a perfect capture of the end of the Ice Age on that wall there. And also these huge stones in the middle perched on top of each other. They almost look like a entrance to a chambered tomb, but they're actually just large rocks thrown around by the turbulent water, landed perched upon each other and standing safely for thousands of years after. After that, we make our way back to the previous chamber, and actually on the wall you can see where the different periods of deposition occurred. I really couldn't capture it with the video, but where there's two types of limestone meet, Carboniferous and a sedimentary form. There's like a pudding stone version of limestone and a sedimentary limestone. And emerging from the cave, as you walk down the valley, take the path on the left next to the canal, and you can see the hyena cave, named because hyena bones were found here. And basically animals and later Neanderthals and Homo sapiens lived and rested in this small cave, which was readily accessible. There's another one further up the valley as well, but it's much less visible. These are just small open caves that provided basic shelter. And the valley here outside, there's some lovely attractions. Children will love it. Adults for having fun as well, I can tell you. This is the canal that was built to power or provide the water source as much as power, because paper making needs a lot of water, and this was parchment paper, but we'll get to that in a minute. And at the end here you can see the cave itself, or the cave map. All of that cave system is hidden inside that hillside, and that is the real opening where the River Axe flows in to the cave system. But we're going to head down, and I won't show you all of it, but we're going to have a quick look at the dinosaurs, and you'll see why it's not just children that enjoy those. And the paper factory, the diving exhibition. And there's also a Wookey Hole 4D theatre experience, which is a lot of fun but pointless to video, so definitely do go there. So whatever your favourite dinosaur is, there's Diplodocus, Brontosaurus, nice Triceratops, T-Rex, as we can see to the right here. And just in case you were thinking that this is like a museum on dinosaurs, to go with T-Rex is his old buddy King Kong. Behind it you can see animatronic dinosaurs which move. There are sensors, just make sure to trip them. You get the sound and movement, a lot of fun. And there's a dinosaur valley here with a lot of different velociraptors and Ankylosaurus, pterodactyl, different types of plesiosaur. I would say the frills on this were actually added for the Jurassic Park movie. It didn't have frills, but they looked very good for the movie. And a mammoth buried in the tar pit. If you ever get a chance to go to Los Angeles, they have the La Brea tar pits, where there's an excellent collection of mammoths, woolly mammoths, werewolves, saber-toothed tigers, which were captured by the tar and preserved. Up there, lovely Stegosaurus, different types of plesiosaur here. Now you might say the colours are a little bit imaginative, but we don't know what colour they were, so why shouldn't we pretend they're quite bright? You can see Ichthyosaur up there with its thumb. Go. Like he's doing a thumbs up all the time. At the bottom is the 4D theatre. I'm not going to show the theatre itself, but you have an entrance hall with upside down room, and it's part of the story, but you're going to have to go to find out what the story is. It's a lot of fun for kids of all ages. As we mentioned earlier, Wookey Hole was where cave diving really began in Britain, and there's a good explanation here of how they discovered the different chambers, the way they got through, and a display of some of the equipment that's used. Actually, there is some of the lightweight ropes that are used for, and ladders that are used for climbing around caves. And that's more akin to rock climbing, whereas you very quickly move into diving. This is the original setup. So they went through those narrow tunnels to the first 4 chambers, using that pipe to carry the air, a small box in the foreground to communicate, and wearing that huge deep sea diving helmet. I cannot see how I'd want to wear that in a cave, whereas it soon evolved to a slightly more modern version of lightweight but tough clothing with inflatable vest and breathing apparatus. Evolved more to the 70s and 90s onwards, but even today you get a similar equipment to this. So the compressed air tanks hung either side on the waist, and more eye protection and a lot more lighting for cave diving. And there's a map of the cave system which we went through. And certainly they get to see a lot more of the cave than we do, but I will leave them to it. And this is the more recent system for cave diving. You can see cross between diving and climbing, and really a mixed disciplinary skill. And here's some of the finds from deep within the cave. You can see portions of human bodies buried there, pieces of pottery. There's actually a skeleton in the Wells Museum which is labelled as the Wookey Witch, which was found deep within this cave. Then upstairs there's a small display of the paper factory. This is actually a very significant paper factory for about 200 years because it makes paper, but it's more parchment, legal parchment paper, think of it that way. Much as today, if you've got a legal document, it's a much thicker paper. And for legal and records that have to last a long time, this type of paper is used, which is not made from plants and from wood pulp, but is actually made from rags. And it's the origin of the rag and bone man, that the rag and bone man would collect rags, and the rags would be sold by the bag to this mill in Wookey, and they would shred, put water, form a mulch, a pulp, flatten it into sheets of paper, dry it out, and at the end of the process would end up with a parchment type paper. And we've got a lot of the equipment that was used for this process. And about 200 years it ran. It's why there's the canal here. And it also was the main employer in Wookey throughout that time. You can see here that's a vat for mixing the pulp. And then here there's machines for rolling, flattening, squeezing the water out. Almost like washing clothes in the old way. From all of this, they produce parchment paper, which apparently has a life of about 500 years. So you could see why this very bespoke and expensive type of paper had real value in the legal industry and was used for 2 centuries. Now, presumably, there's a cheap Chinese equivalent, and obviously everything's going digital. But here's how it used to be done. And it's a small but interesting museum at the end of the tour, which, if you like museums and watch some of our museum tours, then you'll appreciate the paper mill at the end. These are the cutting tables where the rags were shredded, put in baskets, then put in the vat with water, pulped and glued and stuck together, flattened, the water squeezed out, dried out, and what you end up with is a paper like this. It's almost like the paper that you'd use for blotting paper back in the day. And it was made from a mixture of rags, denim, hemp, all producing this very special Wookey Hole paper. There's also a lovely collection of attractions from a pier and a hall of mirrors made, but I'm not going to take you through everything here. And a lovely little model here of the cave system, along with an explanation of how the caves were used over the years by hunter-gatherers, Neanderthals, Homo sapiens, and ancient Britons using them. We presume for some ritual purposes, because they have found what appear to be offerings and burials, and certainly deeper in the cave the Romans carried out burials. But now, with modern technology and the bravery of cave divers, we're far deeper into the river system than was ever achieved before. And there's a good explanation of their formation, their structure, the types of stone there, the evidence of previous animal life. And they're worth a little visit. Not too highfalutin, quite a pleasant, accessible museum, and there's some Neanderthal skulls, along with a whole bunch of evidence of ancient man in terms of animals that they killed and eaten in the cave, and the various tools that were discovered here. There's actually a good collection in Wells Museum as well, which we'll maybe get to sometime. They're an explanation of the Wookey Witch. But for about 50,000 years, Wookey caves have been used for a mixture of living, shelter, ritual, religious offerings, and now adventure. So I hope you enjoyed our visit to Wookey Hole. I know it's probably a different take on a museum or a attraction, which is often seen as a kind of kids' fun in a cave. But I hope you'll agree, there's a lot more to Wookey Hole than just the cave, and certainly plenty for adults to enjoy. So please do like and subscribe, and come back next week for some more Unbound history.